Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moscow Board of Adjustments meeting for June 30th, 2018.
July.
Oh, wow, it's July already. My bad, sorry. It's about to be August. Okay. So, with that, let's get to the minutes from our last meeting, which lasted a whole
8 minutes.
8 minutes. I didn't even find a Scribner. Is there any comment on the minutes?
It looks accurate.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. The minutes are approved. Would the city care to tell us about our first agenda item?
Good evening. Okay, so for your review tonight, we have a application for a conditional use permit for an accessory structure not to exceed 1,500 square feet located at 808 Park Drive. The application is for a conditional use permit to build a 1,500 square foot detached garage. 808 Park Drive is located within a moderate density single family zoning district, R2. And in the R2 zone, attached or detached private garages and workshops not to exceed 1,500 square feet are permitted with a conditional use permit. So the applicant turned in this application for a detached garage that's 30 feet wide, 50 feet deep, and just under 25 feet tall. There is approximately 10-foot setback on the side, 20 feet in the rear. There's lap siding and 612 pitch roof to match the existing architectural facade of the primary dwelling unit. And the primary dwelling unit sits on just under a half an acre. So this is the site plan that was submitted by the applicant. You can see the primary dwelling unit here and the proposed new garage just here on the side. And this is the west elevation. There's 2 garage doors, one for an RV use. South elevation. And so a little bit about the surrounding land use. It's primarily residential on all adjacent properties surrounding the property. Just to the north, there's a small neighborhood business bubble up here. There's a church called Church of Nazarene and a funeral chapel as well. And to the east, there are some community parks. So this is the zoning. As I said, it's primarily residential or all around the subject property, and they're all in the R2 zone. And there's the neighborhood business right to the north. So Chapter 2, Land Use and Community Character of the Comprehensive Plan, designates the subject property as Auto Urban Residential. Auto Urban Residential designation includes the conventional and more recently developed subdivisions with lots ranging from 6,000 to 9,000 square feet where there are no alleys. These designated areas are generally anticipated to be developed for low to moderate density residential uses at densities between 3 to 7 units per acre, which could include a mix of detached single family. Chapter 3, Community Mobility, identifies Park Drive as a local neighborhood street. So a little bit of background about the property here. The total area of the parcel is 21,550 square feet. The footprint of the primary dwelling unit is 2,934 square feet. The frontage to Park Drive is 75 feet. And so the Park Drive cul-de-sac has a 50-foot right-of-way. The street there is 34 feet wide, and there's parking allowed on both sides of the street. And then the actual cul-de-sac in the center is 70 feet wide. There's just a closer-up image of that. So some other considerations to think about: garages and workshops up to 1,000 square feet in size are allowed by right within the R2 zone. On October 21st, 2013, Ordinance 2013-16 amended the R2 zone to permit garages and workshops up to 1,500 square feet in size as a conditionally permitted use. So this property is located within both the 100-year and 500-year floodplain. And because of this, when the applicant turns in a building permit, they will be required to show certain aspects to show that they're mitigating for flood. So some of those mitigation measures will include anchoring the building to the foundation, elevating utilities above the base flood elevation, and also installing flood vents. And they're required to install one square inch of flood vent for every square foot of the proposed building. So they'll need to install 1,500 square inches of flood vents. So staff recommends approval of the proposed conditional use permit at 808 Park Drive for a 1,500 square foot garage with no conditions. The commissioner shall direct staff to develop relevant criterion standards to be reviewed at a following meeting. And here are the relevant criterion standards for you to look over. And with that, I'm available for any questions you might have. Yes.
I have a question before you, Marshall. The percentage of lot coverage, I noticed this is a really large lot. So what is the percentage of the lot that both buildings would take up should this be approved?
I would
Do
have
you know?
to calculate that. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Can you tell me what the allowable area is?
I believe it's 35%. I can check though.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Yes.
That's all other uses other than dwellings. So dwellings are exempt from the 35% requirement.
Okay.
Including garages?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep.
So they could cover as much as they wanted?
As long as they met setback requirements.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Marshall.
Leah,
Yes.
could you go back to one of your very first slides when you're showing what the applicant was proposing?
Sure, yeah. So here's the site plan.
Okay. It's one of the very first ones when you described what it was.
Oh, one more back here?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. 30 foot wide by 50 foot deep by, is that 24 foot 10
Yes.
tall? 24 foot 10 inches. Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Anybody else?
Any other questions for staff?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Yep.
With that introduction, I open this up to public discussion. Is the applicant here? Would you care to come up and tell us about your application?
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Rick Beebe. I've lived here since Methuselah was 6. I started school in 1961. Marshall laughing, you probably have been. I can tell you a little history about the lot, actually. This area was developed a long time ago in the middle 50s. A fellow by the name of Cope Gale, like Nils says, oh, I know Cope, but that's Cope's son, actually. This is a long time ago. So this particular lot kind of just what he built, and then they started building stuff around it, and that's why it's such a weird shape, actually. So we've owned the house for a long time. I used to live up on Nottingham in the Canterwood subdivision. So my wife and I wanted to decide we wanted to downsize as far as physical. So I've come to the point where I need to do something as far as space is concerned, or get a different wife, I guess, at this point in time. But we had a lot of room in the other house. We became a pest a little bit to our neighbors. They're all in favor of me doing this because we're not here much. And when we get here in May, we bring our motorhome, and the ground's too wet to park our motorhome on our land, so we end up being in the street a lot of the time, and it's a cul-de-sac and not that large. So they were all in favor of me doing this, so I get the motorhome off the street and onto the lot itself. So essentially, that's what I'm doing. As I said, I've talked to all my neighbors, and nobody's concerned about it. Of course, I realize that that's not the end of the story, and you guys have an input as far as this is concerned. We leave typically in October, and we come back typically the end of April or the 1st of May, so. And we're gonna build the shop, so it's way out of the floodplain, because I don't want water in it either, so. And you'll see what the exterior of the shop looks like. It's very much different than what the house itself looks like. So our next phase after we finish the shop is to put additions on the house itself, so there's gables and a difference as far as the roof line is concerned. So it's essentially a flat roof now, 1 by 12. So I think that's mostly. We have plenty of land as far as setbacks is concerned, so that didn't seem to be a problem. We're helping as far as the neighborhood is concerned, getting my own motorhome out of the street. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have, but, yes.
Did the Pitchers live there?
Who?
Brian Pitcher?
You know, that's not a name I'm
When
familiar with.
he was working for the university several years ago.
That name I don't recognize. I recognize most of them, but not that one.
I knew he lived in thereabouts, and
Well, Phyllis Vian lives in Dr. Adams' house, which is on the south corner. Terry Gregory lives on the north side of that subdivision, and a newcomer, Brad Lewis's dad, Jerry Lewis.
well, I was going to say, as I was looking at this, I could have sworn that I'd been
in the house?
is there a pool in there?
Yes, there is in the
I
backyard.
think at one point, he must have been there, because I know
Probably.
I've been,
The pool's been there for about a while,
yeah,
so.
okay, thought
Yeah.
that I was familiar with the ground, so.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's it.
Any other questions for Mr. Beebe?
Okay.
Seeing none? Thank you.
I don't know much anyway, so.
Would anybody else care to come up and speak in favor of this application? Seeing none of the remaining 3 of you, would anybody care to come up and speak in opposition? Or neutral? Or not at all? With that, I close the public hearing and open this up to the board to talk about. Marshall?
Well, I think it's a fairly straightforward application. It makes sense to me. It's a very large lot, which can accommodate the structure. It meets the setbacks, so they don't have to have a variance on the setbacks. And it would be nice to get Mr. Beebe's motorhome off the street. I'm sure his neighbors would appreciate that, and not having any opposition from the neighbors. And one more bit of information too, 800 Park Drive also, they received a variance, clear back in the 80s for a garage structure. So I guess I'm very much in favor of the conditional use permit. And
Well, and I appreciate the fact that the city addressed that recently the size has been changed to accommodate larger garages. So this now is a permitted size.
Remember, we used to.
Yes,
We used
because
to go around on
cars
these,
are bigger
that's
than 1,000-square-foot garages can accommodate nowadays. So this is an appropriate size, and it's just required to have a conditional use. So I, too, am in favor.
I support
Any
this.
other thoughts from the board before someone care to make a motion then?
I'd move approval of the conditional use permit for the garage that was designed with no conditions.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah. It is unanimous, so the conditional use is approved. With regards to the criteria, I think I know what we need to do. Does someone want to make a motion to have staff provide us relevant criteria and findings of fact based on something? Trying to lead you on?
Yeah.
Marshall?
I'd move approval of directing staff to bring forward some relevant criteria and standards for us to look at addressing the conditional use permit.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. And that is approved unanimously as well.
All right.
With that, on to the second application tonight. Good evening.
All right, Mr. Chair, board members. So before you tonight, we've got a public hearing for a CUP application for a drive-through coffee espresso stand at 625 South Jackson Street. The proposal is the drive-through coffee espresso stand with operations being conducted daily from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., 1 to 2 employees working at a time. Using the existing ingress and egress approaches on the north and south of the property, as well as room for 5 vehicles to queue with some additional queuing right next to those 5 queuing spaces, which are required by our drive-through facility standards. Equipment includes an espresso machine, grinder, blender, microwave, refrigerator, and ice machine within the coffee stand. So this is the subject property. It's the old Silos property, as it's referred to, on Jackson Street. So 625 South Jackson, outlined in red at the center of your screen. To the north is the property held by the Urban Renewal Agency at the southwest corner of 6th and Jackson. You have University Point, development here along 6th Street. Kreitz Seed is to the southwest of this property, which is still in operations. Brunel Tire to the southeast, across Jackson Street. And we have a Banner Bank here to the northeast of this property. Jackson Street is a national highway running north-south. It's got presently 3 southbound traffic lanes. So taking a look at the comprehensive plan, currently designated as urban mixed. It's intended to provide for infill development and adaptive reuse of areas around downtown. It points to a rich mix of residential and limited commercial, should be promoted through small urban apartments, townhomes, and 2 to 3 story vertically mixed-use buildings. Should provide a pedestrian connection to the U of I in downtown, and then a space for housing alternatives, niche retail, restaurants, artist studios, and personal and professional services. Off-street parking should be required, but likely reduced, just because of the likely number of non-motorized travel the use will attract. Looking at the current zoning designation, it's urban mixed commercial. To the north is central business. To the east is central business as well, and Brunel and a existing warehouse used by Gritman doctors. To the east of that are zoned industrial. So looking at the urban mixed commercial, it's intended to provide for a location of urban mixed development, including a range of compatible commercial uses, so retail, eating, drinking, hospitality establishments, professional and personal services, and residential uses. So it's intended to promote an urban development form, promote a mixture of commercial and residential land uses, and then it points to appropriate location, close proximity to central business in the downtown, where the urban form of the development's appropriate and the intensity of allowed commercial land uses can be accommodated. And then a wide variety of uses are allowed in urban mixed commercial, ranging from residential uses above or behind commercial uses, under the category of amusement and recreation facilities, financial technology and professional services, food and beverage services, beverage manufacturing, so microbreweries, public institutional uses, retail personal services, temporary uses, parking lots and garages, hotel, motel, and drive-through facilities. So like we mentioned before, Jackson Street's a national highway. Currently a one-way street with 3 southbound lanes, paved shoulder on the west side of the street, and then curb gutter and 5-foot sidewalks are also located on both sides of the street. It's controlled by Idaho Transportation Department, so the applicant will need to eventually upgrade their right-of-way use permit and gain approval to the new access to the highway system. So looking through, these are fairly new with our use table ordinance, which was approved a couple months ago through council. We now have drive-through facility standards. requiring a number of spaces provided depending upon drive-through windows. In this case, it's just one drive-through window being proposed, so they'd be required to provide 5 queuing spaces. Size of the space is 12 feet wide by 20 feet in depth for all 5 of those spaces. Turning radius needs to meet a 20-foot turning radius for any turns entering the drive-through or exiting the drive-through. Needs to be clearly demarcated in order to demonstrate where the drive-through lanes are located. And then looking forward to additional queuing that may be required to prevent spill out into an adjacent street or highway. Looking at that scenario as part of the review. Landscaping requirements, there's required to be a 3-foot landscape buffer between the drive-through lane and the public street right-of-way or adjacent property. So this is the site plan that the applicant submitted. To the north is to the left of your screen. So we've got Jackson Street. This is 3 southbound lanes. We've got an existing entrance approach here to the north. You have room for 5 queuing spaces. And this site plan is a little bit different. The applicant had modified that to demonstrate an additional queuing space right next to those 5 queuing spaces to account for overflow, so there would be no spilling out into the Jackson Street right away at any time. So this is the existing silos building. You have a brick building here to the north, various silos, and then a large silo here to the south of the property. So the circulation would enter through the north entrance, go through the drive-through window, and then exit out the existing southern entrance there. There are a number of, at least one other use on this property, which is a food truck. It's located on the northern portion of this property. So you've got the northern approach here and the southern approach there. The proposed coffee stand would be relocated to right here. And then the food truck currently operates right on the north side of this property. It does provide some outdoor seating with a restroom porta potty that would satisfy building code requirements. So taking a look at the proposed coffee stand, it just looks like a typical coffee stand that you would see, 20 by 14 feet in height. And this is a conceptual of what that structure is proposed to look like. So staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit application for a drive-through coffee espresso stand located at 625 South Jackson Street with 2 conditions. The first one is that the CUP shall expire 5 years from the date of approval in order to be able to assess any conditions in the area that have changed within that time frame. So this property is in Legacy Crossing Overlay District, and as you can tell from the intent statements of a lot of the urban mixed and urban mixed commercial zones, it's more intended to have more of a 2-3-story urban environment, built environment. And so with the coffee stand, it's declared a CUP within our urban mixed commercial zone, but the Legacy Crossing Overlay District, the design standards that are present in this area, really hadn't anticipated a drive-through coffee stand to happen on one of these properties. And so the applicant as well as the property owner have indicated that this is more of a temporary nature. We do have temporary uses which are allowed, but they're only allowed to operate for a certain period of each year. They're not able to operate the entire year, so it wouldn't necessarily meet our definition of temporary uses, even though it is similar to a temporary use on the property. And so that's why we would recommend that it be allowed for 5 years, and at that point in time, it would expire in order to be able to reassess any conditions that have changed within that area as properties develop and are required to come into compliance with the design guidelines. And the second recommended condition is the applicant obtain necessary approvals through ITD and meet any requirements deemed necessary to mitigate impact to the transportation system in the area. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Marshall?
Yeah, I guess I got 2 of them, Mike. First of all, are they required to do any pavement upgrade or anything like that on site for?
At this point in time, we wouldn't require them to do any pavement upgrade. There are some slabs where the stand would be located. We would require that the 3-foot landscape buffer be installed at this time, just because of the temporary nature of this structure and the recommendation that it expire after 5 years, with the anticipation that the property will be redeveloped, into something that would fit within Legacy Crossing in the future. We felt that, going in and requiring pavement of the travel lanes there for the queuing, given that there's gravel and pavement that kind of currently exist out there, it's just in rather poor condition.
You feel that they're able to do the paint striping and demarcation and everything okay with the gravel and concrete?
There's quite a bit of asphalt still out there, so yeah, I feel confident in that.
Okay. And the other question I had too, Mike, do you know anything, are they required to have water or sewer? They have some kind of a different system? And does the health department have to approve the facility before a permit is allowed?
Health department will have to approve the facility. In other instances, the health department's allowed them to be self-contained. And so they would just have to work with the health department, but Nancy had indicated that, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a couple. Has ITD been approached yet? Are getting 2 curb cuts onto the highway? Are we talking about something that they wouldn't approve, or?
They currently exist.
Okay.
So all they need to do is upgrade the approach permit. And so ITD just wants to have a history and current operations of what currently exists, so they can calculate the impact to the highway system and then any mitigation that might be required. It's 3 southbound lanes. It's not like they'd require a designated right turn lane into this property, but they may require certain traffic control, like, no exiting onto the egress, just maybe signage, I think is what we were thinking as far as any type of mitigation to the highway system. But it'll just be through that process that they'd have to work through with ITD, and anything that ITD would require, they would have to comply with.
Okay. And that actually was part of my second question, was signage, not necessarily traffic signage, but just building signage. Is that something that would be addressed during their building permit, or is that something that needs to be addressed here? Are there we've had adjustment meetings regarding signage being too big or too close to right-of-ways and things like that, and so I'm wondering, does that come into play here?
It would just be during the building permit process, and they would just have to abide by our zoning code for any type of signage that they place on the property. Have to be located on private property.
Okay.
Which should be easy to accomplish. The property line is fairly close to the back edge of the sidewalk, so they wouldn't be able to encroach on the sidewalk, so they would, they have quite a bit of room to do some signage there.
Okay.
Has it been considered signage and the landscape buffer that it won't prevent the visibility needed to get back on to Jackson after they leave with their coffee?
Yeah, ITD has a clear zone that they require, and they regulate the size and heights of plantings within that area. And so ITD will still have to review that because it's their clear zone.
Okay.
And then it extends a certain distance from the highway, even though they don't own that property, it's private property. There's still a clear zone there that regulates things like signage and landscaping, where they have to meet those vision triangles and sight distances from existing approaches. So ITD would handle that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, just to be clear. When we talk about reassessing in 5 years, is reassess synonymous with terminate if someone wants to build something house-like there?
Permanent.
House-like out of the stand?
Well, I guess what I'm really trying to say is we're potentially granting this for 5 years, assuming nothing better comes along. And I'm concerned about someone having a successful business there after 5 years and then having having it terminated because somebody else wants to put something different there that's more in the lines of what this area has been designated for. So I just want to get that out in the open and make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I mean, that would just be, I mean, there's no precedence in approving this, you know, it would expire after 5 years, and they'd have to start from scratch because it would be null and void at that point, and so they'd have to go back through the process. I think the, probably negotiations with the owner and the leasee would dictate that.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. With that, I open this up to the public. Would the applicant care to come up and tell us about your project, please? State your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Pat Greenfield, and I'm current owner of Bootzer's Coffee House Pub on Main Street in Moscow for the last 18 and a half years. We used to have a drive-through way back. Does anybody remember Otto's Produce? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a drive-through located on the side of that, and then we expanded. We're done with Otto, and then we moved over to what is now the NSA, well, MZ parking lot, and we had a little portable unit there. And then Bootzer's started getting busy, and we needed to focus our energy on getting that going, which we have. And so for, last 7 years or so, I really wanted another drive-through. But some of the locations fell through because we would be looking at them, and all of a sudden the owner of the property would sell them to, for instance, you know where the former Domino's is? Where now the big apartment complex are. So when we were negotiating with the owner of that property, he sold it to the guy that put all the apartments in. And then another location was on the corner of A and Line. Over there, remember all that acreage that was for sale by the theater, by the old theater that was, closed? We were looking at that on the corner there as a good corner, and then the lady sold the property. So it's kind of just kept happening like that, which is, meant to be. So with this, I was actually approached by the owner of the property, because he kind of wants to see that sort of a whole, earthy thing going on in there. And I think it's a great idea. I understand about the CUP. I get that. And I don't know what Andrew has in mind for the future for that, other than he likes to develop property. So are there any questions?
Any? I have one kind of yes and no. If you're, because I live off of D Street, so when I come down D, you can only hope for you if you're as busy as Dutch Brothers gets. But it looks like on the plan that should you be able to exceed 2 lanes, you could potentially Q3.
Okay.
I know that street can get backed up, which is probably why the city council had their recent meetings. But
Which is probably why there's so much caution with this, yeah.
right. But aside from that, a coffee shop is a pedestrian-related thing. So in my mind, this kind of fits along the lines of what they want this area to become. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, my concern was the same as yours with on certain times of the day or week where we have Dutch Brothers. They've got 3 or 4 lines of traffic going through there that is pretty phenomenal. And but it seems to me that there is more room here for accommodating more queuing if the need is there. And so it seems like what they've got proposed right now is certainly adequate. I would just would hope that they would be able to accommodate off-street the customers that were coming in to purchase the product, because it's great to have something in that area that's
Well, if you remember right, Dutch Brothers at one point had applied to be just across the street, just to the north. And we approved that. And then it got
The bicycle
appealed,
group didn't like
and
it.
The bicycle
So I'm
group didn't
hoping
like
one
it.
of
Then it
the
got
2
appealed
remaining
and
people
shut
sitting
down,
here
I
are
think, at
not
city
with the
council.
bicycle group.
So, I mean, the location is fantastic, because that's exactly where Dutch Brothers wanted to be originally.
Well, do we have any other questions for the applicant? Marshall?
Well, I think it's a great location, and if your coffee's as good as Booster's, it's great.
It's the same roast master doing both. Also, I would like to point out on the Dutch Brothers thing, that right there, that's a 2-lane and a curve where those people are going in and coming out. This is a 3-lane straightway. You know, it's not nearly as congested right there when you're going around that corner. And I know, because I was trying to turn left into Rosars this weekend, and the cars were backed up, and it was challenging.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you, guys.
Would anybody else care to come up and speak in favor of this application? You're here? You might as well say something.
She's my kitchen manager.
Nils Peterson, 841 Travoy Way.
Thank you.
I'm sorry Rick left. My history with this site started when I came to a city council meeting to advocate for a zoning to Central Business District, I believe, at the time. Because that building is iconic, and it is important to me that that building be preserved. That's the last of the real big grain elevators, and it's in a spot where it's well seen, and da-da-da. The Central Business District zoning was going to allow relatively little parking requirements to use the site. I was on P&Z when the Legacy Crossing overlay was developed, and that parcel and others got rezoned together to be what you see today. And I thought, again, this is good. This gives the kind of support, zoning support, that will help that site develop. I was approached by, well, early on, Rick offered to sell me the thing. I'm glad that I sat on my hands. I'm very glad that the Anderson Group did all of the amazing rehab of it to bring it up to a usable, habitable standard, and that they found a buyer when they couldn't find a path forward. Because I kept trying to think, what is the path forward? How do you develop this in a way that is economically viable? And the piece that I came to is sometimes called tactical urbanism, starting with small things, light things, easy things, quick things, pop-up things, and beginning to build momentum. And so I wondered why the Anderson Group didn't go down that path, and I've been glad to see some parking, taco truck, and now another addition, a small scale, lightweight, easy to start on, and to develop, because that site needs to start to make money. If it doesn't make money, somebody's going to want to tear down the building, and then we lose the icon. And have the time to figure out how to get that water and sewer onto the property, and where's the next piece. So Brenda Van Wandruska approached me at one point. She was trying to condoize it. And I spent a bunch of time thinking about, okay, which, it's like a you cut, I choose kind of problem, and which piece could I cut off? I couldn't bite the whole thing. Which piece could I cut off, and how would I use it and not get in the way of other uses? So I'm glad to see this proposal. But I came to talk to you tonight because of Dutch Brothers' current location, sitting on the highway, and we've all seen some of the traffic snarls that result around it. And because of the conversations that were started about, was mentioned, Dutch Bros at 6th and Jackson. I was part of that opposition. And so I had to ask myself, why am I going to support this drive-through when I opposed the 6th and Jackson drive-through? I was coming here to argue for a limited term on the CUP. So I'm glad that staff is proposing that. It gives a variety of options to correct if it's not working when that CUP would expire. I think 5 years is a reasonable amount of time. And so I think, if I recall what I saw, it's, you're going to have to go right to the edge in terms of your determination that this is not a temporary use in the seasonal sort of sense of temporary, and it's not really anticipated as a drive-through. But for the fact that it is a temporary proposal and a chance to see something go forward, we need all of Legacy Crossing to develop. We need to find the toe holds. We almost had one on the corner with Sangria. How do we're not going to get a giant big city developer to come in here and build blocks of that ground out, right? So how do we do it incrementally? And this is what I think that incremental build out looks like. And in 5 years, I hope that something bigger happens and that the drive-through part goes away and something more economically intense happens on parts of that site, and it just keeps inching its way up. So I would recommend that you support the proposal and support it with the 5-year term. Any questions?
Thank you. Last chance for our third member to speak. Okay. With that, I'll close the public hearing and open it up to the board to discuss. Who wants to go first? Thoughts? Steve?
Well, I had highlighted some of the some of my thoughts or concerns, and a lot of the questions were already answered by Michael, and I think that I'm comfortable with getting something started there on that site, and I think that a 5-year revisit date is acceptable to the folks here that are, you know, applying for the application, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So I like the idea of the 5-year trend, and they have to do a number of things here with the transportation department before they're going to get their approval from them anyway. So I think that I'd like to see something happen there.
Yeah, I think all the necessary approvals and permits are in place for a reason, and they're going to work out fine.
I don't have any problems with this application.
I think it's a great location, and I think if she does have a similar problem to Dutch Brothers with all the additional traffic, the site can accommodate it.
I agree, and that would be the plus for her if she has that many cars.
Yeah.
The other plus, you know, not to be, you know, a downer by saying in 5 years, a successful business could go away if something bigger went, but Neil's hit a key point there. A lot of building development, something is easier to develop if there's something successful already happening there, and it wouldn't necessarily mean that this proposal would go away. It just might get incorporated with something bigger. We have no idea. So, but it's pedestrian related. I think it's a great launching point.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move approval of the application with the 2 conditions as proposed by staff.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous, so it is approved unanimously. With regards to conditional uses,
I'll move that
criteria and-
I'll move that we allow staff to prepare those and we can review them and approve them at a later
along
date.
with facts of finding.
Correct.
All right. I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
A second.
I hear a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So, that gets us to the second one. Is there any additional board communication this evening?
I don't think anything from staff, no. We want to pick a date for RCS.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes. Since staff is actually having to generate this for 2 different conditional uses, how much time does staff need?
We could probably do next Tuesday.
Yeah, works for me.
Tuesday the 7th? Can we do it downstairs in the mini conference room?
So we need 48 hours, right? So I guess technically how about this Thursday?
I could pull off this Thursday. The only night this week I can't do is Wednesday, and that's probably going to be too soon for you guys to try to push for that
This will
anyway.
probably be a 10-minute meeting, so are we thinking Thursday at like 5:30?
Yeah, I've got a difficulty on Thursday, but
Yeah, I can do Thursday.
Council Chambers isn't?
When's the next opening for the chambers?
Before council on Monday. Quick meeting.
Then we have to be fast. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah,
Monday would work for me.
that works for me too.
That work for you, Steve?
yes.
Let's aim for Monday.
Okay.
What time on Monday?
5:30?
Monday works for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Monday, 5:30.
All
I
right.
think we'll potentially have another conditional use permit being submitted, so we'll probably look towards the end of August for that meeting date, but we'll keep you posted.
Okay. I would just ask that we get several date options, because when we get to the end of August and school starts happening, that starts becoming a pretty busy time of year. All right. I hear a motion to end this meeting.
So moved.
I'll second that.
There we go. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.